Wazzup, you beautiful bastards. Here we go again. The last time we stopped at the point where Raziel tried to work on his daddy issues, yet with no real success. Our papa goes to get some milk, but this time we wouldn't drop such a case for alimonies and jump right after him. This is where we meet Moebius, the time streamer, and where Soul Reaver 1 slowly flows into Soul Reaver 2. But before we'll throw ourselves into it, a few words on how to run this beast of a game at all. I didn't really have any problem with the first Soul Reaver, yet the second one somehow posed a little more issues on more modern platforms. The Steam version is pretty straightforward. You just need to jump into the community section and download this exact fix. Author, God bless your soul. This fix also allows for fast travel, fast skip of dialogues, which is the bulk of this game, although I can't really understand why would you skip them, because it's the best part of it. You can also save at any place you want, so it's a must-have, especially for the repeated playthroughs. Just download the file, put this DLL into the main folder, and bada boom, the magic has happened. And one more warning. This game is heavily reliant on dialogues and cutscenes. Considering that besides them, this game has not so many things to offer, especially taking into account how old it is, these video series would mostly contain the aforementioned cutscenes and a small or big narration from yours truly. Hope you won't die of boredom. Anyways, on account of what has already happened, you can check here, somewhere on your screen. Please check those videos, goddammit. There is blood and sweat in them. At the beginning, we end up in the stronghold of Seraphan, where the Green Wolfman has once, let's say, dinnered. Our time-traveling friend meets us with open arms, specifically directing our attention not to the place, but to the time in which we appeared. This will pose a great importance. However, his captor has conjured some Unga Bunga, the Reaver of Soul, like the game, you know, can anymore, so Raziel presses the old man out of fear that it's a sabotage. The old fellow is not that easily intimidated, because he knows most of the spoilers for his life and supernatural. Then Raziel asks a very logical in his situation question, and I want you to hear the answer.
How is it that you know my name? We have never met.
On the contrary, Raziel, I know you very well, and it grieves me to see how cruelly Cain has used you. I knew you when you were one of the Saraphan Brotherhood, Raziel. We were even close. Oh, please.
I get some strong Shadow the Hedgehog vibes here. And need to mark that in this game we have an increase of Raziel per 1 gaming hour. And I must say it's a welcome change indeed, although in my opinion he became a little tiny bit too edgy. Yet humor, especially dark humor, was always a part of LegacyOfKain in one form or another, so I wouldn't go too hard on our crazy frog-looking fella. What I think is more interesting, because of all of that time-traveling stuff and narrative density, we don't really notice it, but Raziel has actually risen a few hours or maybe days ago max. And I thought for a long time that such edginess looks weird, because in the first game he was more of a tragic character in comparison to this one. You could see it in how he interacts with the first brother.
Am I reduced to this? A ghoul? A fratricide?
Or how he reacts to the state of affair in Nosgoth, the time he came to life for the second time. No pun intended.
My God! The sanctuary of the clans reduced to ruin.
But gradually throughout the game, Raziel becomes nastier and nastier.
Zephan, your visage becomes you. It's an appropriate reflection of your soul. Rahab, you have adapted well to your environment. For one so maladjusted, my bloodthirst has been superseded by an even darker hunger. I will consume your soul before this day is done.
So it's not really out of character, the way he puts himself in this game. Afterwards, Raziel enters the exact room where Vorador has once massacred the Guardians of the Circle, and it's really cool to see how Razi reacts.
Is this the vampire Vorador?
Yes, the scourge of the Circle, the most depraved and decadent example of his whole degenerate race. He slaughtered 6 of my fellow Guardians as they cowered defenseless in this room.
And you somehow survived this massacre?
I and 2 others. The Circle was devastated. Only we 3 were spared.
How convenient.
Like an actual human who would end up in a very historically significant place. He asks questions about it, which in its place describes most of the lore to the newcomers. In any other game it would go as a cliché or banality, but here it's done in a very natural way, so A+ for lore dropping. Raziel of course takes everything said by Moebius with a grain of salt, as one should from a man like him. Our friendies dish the dirt on the case subject, on what a bad guy he was and blah blah blah. It's clear that it would play in Moebius' hand if Raziel would clip Cain, so he dugs our race up against him. He even proposes some help, where Raziel in his place tries to undermine any kind of help that the old man could arrange. Yet the old Yeller figures the IP of the Yellow Deity out and gives it directly to the Blue Boy. And to establish the bad guys' nest of Moebius, we get this cutscene.
Go to him, Raziel, and end this. But first, you will need to find your way out of the stronghold, and in this, I'm afraid I cannot help you. My soldiers will not understand your appearance here. They will try to kill you. You needn't fear them, of course. They're no match for you. Try to keep the casualties to a minimum. But do what you have to do. All great movements require a few martyrs.
And to wrap it all up, all of that foreplay establishes the time where Raziel has come to, right before the corruption of the pillars, so we got very damn far into the past.
Have you heard that being not subscribed to my channel was added to the list of cardinal sins? Right after Sloth. So do subscribe for your own salvation. Thank you.
Where to begin? Firstly, a giant graphical leap. I mean, the animations became much smoother, and you can make them even more smooth by setting the game to 120 FPS. Batshit crazy. And even with how cardboardy the characters look, you can read an emotion on a face almost without muscles and partially covered. If it's not a crazy job, I don't know what is. We have also gotten a few upgrades for the fighting system, and per usual I will try to protect it in this game as well. We now have a heavy and a light attack. The light attacks are identical to the attacks we had in the first game. The heavy attacks, as it comes, are pretty heavy and could be used for pushing, smashing, and even juggling. The game was released after the first DMC, no wonder. I mean, it's really fucking clunky and inconvenient, yet it's made up by the NPC's actions in a fight. Firstly, there is no difficulty setting, even before Dark Souls, so most of the enemies are fucking rabid. They move chaotically, don't mind to spam the stagger attacks and gang you up not worse than those BBCs from Sekiro. So it's kind of even fun to fight them, but there is no incentive to do that. They don't drop anything, they don't affect your progression. They are just there to stay on your way and drag the time between cutscenes. And even with that retarded high that I get from fighting them, it's not enjoyable enough for the sake of it. So most of the game I utilize the Niggerundayo tactics, Not to mention that there are enough situations where you're forced to fight them anyway. So my advice, run past them where you can. There will be enough instances where you can't. Besides that, this is the good old Soul Reaver, if a little smoother and dolled up. Carry on. The beautiful facades and murals sold Raziel the good guy vibe of Seraphan Order 100%. Yet it doesn't stop him from gutting a few ambassadors of this good guyism. Eventually we get into the Chapel of Seraphan, where the wild magic wand of Moebius doesn't work anymore and the spectral blade comes out to play. Raziel contemplates on the topic of how cool the weapon of Moebius is, how effective he could whack the bloodsuckers during his crusade, and on why does it have an effect on the spectral blade. After that we come to the tomb of the
Beloved King William the Just,
who in his place was whacked by Cain, which became the catalyst of all of that vampire whacking stuff in the future. Or past. The most observant of you might ask, why do they both have the Soul Reaver on that stained glass? You see, in the first Blood Omen, Cain has actually gotten the blade in heaven.
Time fades even legend, and the origin of Soul Reaver has been lost long ago. But its purpose remains, to feed on the souls of any creature it strikes. Kindred, this blade and I. The Soul Reaver.
Don't ask. And through the provocation from Moebius moved back in time to kill the Kid King with the same good old blade. Yet right before that, the Time Streamer has given the king a version of Soul Reaver from the time before. So that's how we got two of them. One on top of the tomb and another broken over Razi's back. It appears that the soul of the Soul Reaver, no pun intended again, was lying dormant inside of Razi's body. The mid-up with its corporeal form has woken up the blade, so now it's more of a 50-50 relationship between them. By an old Kakaldish tradition, not a less old man observes all of this and comes into the attention of our Wraith. At first I couldn't really understand why would Moebius come without his staff, but then I got to understand again that this would most likely disrupt the unification of Raziel and the blade, so okay. The other question, why would he need to observe all of that even if it was planned by him? The old pervert. I love how Raziel feels the full domination over Moebius, so I'll put this bit uncut.
What have you done to me, Moebius? Is this your trap?
How mine? Don't forget it was Cain who led you here, not I. While you curse me, the only soul in Nosgoth ready to guide and assist you, Cain laughs at our folly and revels in your dismay.
These blades, now coiled in sinister embrace, have inspired terror in the hearts of creatures far more durable than you, old man. Bound together as they are, I can only imagine what they could do to your soul's fragile shell.
Raziel, I beg you to stay your hand. This was none of my doing. I have sought only to aid you in your righteous quest.
Why, you're trembling, Moebius. Has your confidence abandoned you? You seem to have made a fatal error by leaving your precious staff behind. Is that where all your courage comes from?
Listen to me, Raziel. You don't know what you're doing. I have taken an enormous risk by appearing here before you, so defenseless, yet eager to prove my good intentions. If there's anything left of the Seraphan in you, you won't do this. While you threaten me, your true enemy eludes you.
Don't concern yourself with Cain, old man. He'll join you in hell soon enough. As you said, death comes for us all.
Yes, the wheel of fate demands it.
What did you say?
The wheel of fate. The inexorable cycle of death and rebirth to which all men are compelled. We serve the same God, Raziel. To strike me down, would be striking God's own attendant. And I don't believe even you would take that risk.
I tire of your games, Moebius. Now that I know you fear me, I needn't concern myself with you. Cain is waiting for me.
At the end, we of course get another shot of snaky Moebius menacingly scheming schemes, and back to Razy. The blade now is able to be called upon even when their health snaily is slightly ahead, where in the previous game it wouldn't come out to play if Razy would lose some of that precious greeny blood. The downside would be the hunger of the sword, which now feeds upon the souls instead of us. It also explains the loss of some health, which was partially eaten by the awakened Reaver. A cool little rebalance, me likey. I also like the fact that we could play a little with the old fully healthy version of Razy and his old blade, just like the continuity between two games being held. Before we go out, we could also check a stained glass with Janos Audron, one of the ancient vampires who... we'll talk about him some other time. I just like the fact that Raziel doesn't really buy the boogeyman stories that were told about this vampire.
But I wondered, could Janos Audron truly have been as monstrous as depicted here? Or was this merely artistic license by the Seraphan, who sought to lionize themselves by demonizing their darkest enemy?
Per usual, I tried to insert a few contemplations on the real-life inspirations for the game, so here, Gothic. Gothic almost everything, nothing more to add. Before Razy moves out, we go into the chamber where he and his brothers were immortalized on the walls and observe yet another act of Razy's self-pleasing, with all of that talk about the noble and righteous past that was taken from me, and afterwards him seeing the world of Nosgoth before the corruption of the pillars for the first time. It's not that interesting in my opinion. No wonders that a zombie land looks like a much worse option in comparison to practically anything, especially this beautiful landscape. We move down and see the first checkpoint. And you know, I like when gaming conventions are clarified within the lore of the game, but only when it makes sense. I could forgive those Maya football circles all around Nosgoth, but those obelisks...
These ancient obelisks were mysteriously attuned to my spiritual essence. By simply touching the symbol, I could safely preserve an imprint of my soul, and thus create a milestone to which I could return when weary, and from which I could resume my journey.
I mean, there could be some small shrines to the elder gods scattered all over Nosgoth or something, for example, which could serve the same purpose. Get the giant statue of Soul Reaver with the markings precisely for the hands of the old vampires during the crusade against the vampires? I don't think so. The location through which we go is tightly packed with enemies. A rookie 10 years old me would try to smoke each and every one of these bastards. The more wise and experienced me, however, tried to do the same, yet with no success. So I Forrest Gumped the whole area. During the Forrest Gumping, Razy sees the brutality of the war that was pledged against his kind. It brings up a question of whether such brutality was really needed, and to think about it, there are a lot of vampires chilling on the stakes, and most of them wear pretty regular clothing and look pretty human-y. It makes me wonder how well the vampires were implemented into society before Cain's deed. Maybe humans and vampires were homies before all of that stuff. Hey, be a homie of mine as well and leave this video a like and a subscription if you like this at all. Would really appreciate that. At last we meet our puppy, and the next cutscene is firstly very fucking great. Secondly, opens the characters even deeper. Thirdly, very fucking great, and lays the foundation for the conflict of this, previous, and the next Legacy of Cain, where our Labudidabudai boy has an honor of being a protagonist. I will shut up for now and let you bathe in the glory of this cutscene.
The pillars of Nosgoth, pristine, whole, and uncorrupted. I had never beheld them in this undefiled state, yet something profound and indelible resonated within me at the sight. And there, waiting at the very heart of the pillars, was the canker that was destined to destroy them.
I know you're there, Raziel.
Moebius led me to you, Cain, though I might have guessed you'd meet me here.
And if Moebius told you I was hidden on the underside of hell, would you throw yourself into oblivion to pursue me? Moebius trawls for the ignorant and unwary, hauling his gasping prey from the streams of their destinies. Stay out of his net, Raziel.
Spare me your elaborate metaphors, Cain. I have pursued you here for one purpose. You will pay for your betrayal, and balance will thus be restored to Nosgoth.
And whose will is satisfied then? The will of Raziel or Moebius?
Would I be better manipulated by you, Cain? Now, turn and face me. The chase is over.
This isn't a chase, Raziel. We are merely passengers on the wheel of destiny, describing a perfect circle to this point. We've been brought here for a reason. I've seen the beginning and the end of our story, however, and the tale is crude and ill-conceived. We must rewrite the ending of it. You and I.
Face me, Cain. Even you shouldn't die a coward's death.
Isn't it customary to grant the condemned a final request?
I recall no such courtesy from you.
Indulge me, Raziel. All I ask is that you listen. This is the sublime moment of our undoing, Raziel. The ineffable fulcrum upon which swings the entirety of our history. This is where all of Nosgoth is betrayed. In this instant, Ariel, the Balance Guardian, is murdered by dark forces bent on overthrowing the pillars. Her spirit is just now tearing free, lost in the ether, trying to find its way here. You have already seen how she comes to haunt these pillars.
Bound here by your refusal to die. You are the reason this land becomes diseased. As long as you remain alive, you condemn Nosgoth to an eternity of decay.
Be still, Raziel. See this. As Ariel dies, I am being born to take her place as Balance Guardian. Such is my destiny.
My God.
At the moment of my first cry, Ariel's beloved, the Guardian Nupraptor, finds her corpse. Racked with grief and tormented by suspicions of treachery, Nupraptor plunges into a madness which overflows and infects all of the Guardians who are symbiotically bound, including me. The repercussions of Ariel's assassination were expertly calculated. The entire circle descends into madness, and I am tainted at the moment of my birth, instantly rendered incapable of fulfilling the role destiny has prepared for me.
Shall I show you the same mercy you showed the rest of the circle, then? You blithely murdered them to restore their pillars, yet your hand faltered when it came to the final sacrifice. What makes you exempt, Cain? You're merely the last man standing. Why condemn me for simply carrying out what you hadn't the courage to do yourself?
Let's drop the moral posturing, shall we? We both know there's no altruism in this pursuit. Your reckless indignation led you here. I counted on it. There's no shame in it, Raziel. Revenge is motivation enough. At least it's honest. Hate me, but do it honestly. 30 years hence, I am presented with a dilemma. Let's call it a two-sided coin. If the coin falls one way, I sacrifice myself and thus restore the pillars. But as the last surviving vampire in Nosgoth, this would mean the annihilation of our species. Moebius made sure of that. If the coin lands on the reverse, I refuse the sacrifice and thus doom the pillars to an eternity of collapse. Either way, the game is rigged.
We agree then that the pillars are crucial and must be restored.
Yes, Raziel. And that's why we've come full circle to this place.
So after all this, you make my case for me. To end this stalemate, you must die so that new guardians can be born.
The pillars don't belong to them, Raziel. They belong to us.
Your arrogance is boundless, Cain.
There's a third option. A monumental secret, hidden in your very presence here. But it's a secret you have to discover for yourself. Unearth your destiny, Raziel. It's all laid out for you here.
You said it yourself, Cain. There are only two sides to your coin.
Apparently so. But suppose you throw a coin enough times. Suppose one day it lands on its edge.
You know, I like to compare this scene to the one from the first Soul Reaver. Both of them show Cain not as a mindless freak who does bad things for the sake of doing bad things, but as a man with a plan.
The blade is vanquished. So it unfolds. And we are a step closer to our destinies.
First game wouldn't show it openly, but if you would look deeper, Cain actually helps Raziel to get to him. Soul Reaver was a great power-up in doing so. It also was the first part of the puzzle that Cain meticulously created. The second part of the puzzle is this scene. Yellow Daddy reveals the trap that was set by Moebius, and living in human body for around 40 years in comparison to around 2000 years in a body of a vampire, no wonders Cain would try to preserve his vampiric heritage more. Not to portray him as a pure soul. He is still an egomaniac who appreciates his own life above else and would play from his own interest even if he was a monkey or a wolf. And he doesn't really hide it. Same couldn't really be said about Razi, who still plays pureness and integrity, although I don't think that the memory of total annihilation of humans by his kind is burrowed somewhere too deep to get there. I also love the fact that Cain had enough of this shit and makes Raziel to call things as they are.
Let's drop the moral posturing, shall we? We both know there's no altruism in this pursuit. Your reckless indignation led you here. I counted on it. There's no shame in it, Raziel. Revenge is motivation enough. At least it's honest. Hate me, but do it honestly.
I think that this sincereness has brought Razi's attention, because he wouldn't really yap throughout the whole Cain's monologue as he usually does, and even would be intrigued afterwards. As a whole, this scene was perfect. From subtle movements to pauses,
hate me, but do it honestly,
and intonations.
Now, turn and face me. The chase is over.
I mean, even with these cardboard shells for voices, our thoughts could breathe into them so much life that I wouldn't feel the same from a game till fucking Baldur's Gate 3. And we're talking about the 2001 game, have to remind you.
After a tete-a-tete with the owner of the most based power walk in the history, Raziel is left intrigued. and spares the Yellow Daddy for the meantime. I was always in question on what kind of threat could one pose against an entity which can literally disappear or be turned into a swarm of bats, but yeah, the gaming game conventions. Before we throw ourselves into unearthing our destiny, and because we have already touched upon the walking manner of Cain, I'd like to talk precisely about it. Walking. You see, Soul Reaver was made at the times where attention span of many people was a little bit longer than 2 TikTok swipes. So the developers weren't that concerned with how dense the gameplay is or how fast the playable character moves, at least not to the extent of the modern ones. Everybody marveled at the newly appeared 3D graphics, so the slow-paced movement of many characters was normal. Playing this game 20 Jesus, are we old? Years later, the absence of the sprint button in a game where your main occupation is moving forward for very long distances stands out pretty badly. Especially when you have to make footages and record things a few times. So my puny monkey brain began to play the AD chess to get to make the stall process a little less tedious. That's why I am honored to present you the most mathematically precise comparison of movement in Soul Reaver 2. I've just taken a room and moved in it with a timer. The first variable, and the classics of Soul Reaver, and any game actually, the plane running. For our blue sprinter to cover a regular Seraphan hole, it takes around 10 seconds. This is the base amount of time we need to overcome here. While making the footages, I have accidentally uncovered the second variable we need to calculate here, the button mashing type of movement. The monkey in me has triumphed at the time because the camera was moving fast, and those fast twitches looked faster than the regular movement, and it should be faster when it looks faster, right? Yet the NPCs that were catching up with me no problem have proven me wrong. The time in which Razy goes from one part of the hole to another was not that impressive either. Not to mention that such movement pushes more pressure on your thumb than the old school God of War boss battles, so it wouldn't be a viable option, if you're not into it of course. You weirdo. After all of this elaborate scheming and mind games with myself, I came to actually a pretty easy conclusion: to check on the speedrunners. And, well, the answer was pretty obvious as well. Jumping. It's indeed the most efficient way of movement in this game, so now you know. Hope you are glad to spare this amount of your life for this info. Moving on. In the aftermath of the TED Talk from Razy's father, we are met by a subtle hint on how to move on and move on. I've never really touched upon this aspect, but back in the days, this realm-changing mechanics was mind-blowing actually. We had a whole location with 2 different layouts, different NPCs, and almost no loading time between them. Soul Reaver is actually a master at hiding loading screens behind opening of the doors and cutscenes, for example. Now it might seem a little annoying to watch a whole small scene of Razy opening doors and then them closing behind him, but back then, in comparison to them giant loading screens between the areas in other games, this Soul Reaver approach would make you really immerse into the world of Nosgoth. Not to mention that Raziel opens doors in a really cool manner most of the time, so yeah, it was very cool. And still is. And yeah, there is also a change in music when you go from one realm to another, yet it's not a completely new composition, but a regular, slightly distorted and made to sound spookier one. Moving forward, Raziel feels being observed. And no wonders. There is a whole bunch of suspiciously camera-looking birds in the proximity. I could never understand why would someone use so many of them just to look after our wraith. The 2 or 3 of them would do the job alright, but obviously the guy behind it has too big of a budget. Not to mention that the devs couldn't let you go without checking on this cool looking animation, so there is this as well. We meet a door with a suspiciously recognizable fella, and not a less suspicious hole that is suspiciously made to fit the Soul Reaver. Suspicious. We enter this door and check on the obligatory animation of it closing behind us. If you plan to play or replay this game, it will fright the hell out of you sometime. Upon entering, it appears to be some old cave with remnants of a civilization long gone, and meet some dark energy freaks that were actually much easier than I remember them from my childhood, so I've smoked them for the hell of it. The fighting system in this game can be even fun sometimes, not gonna deny this. Unfortunately, we wouldn't get any explanation on what those things are. They have some kind of flicker inside, so I thought that those were the old souls that were awakened to protect this place. Yet those things wouldn't be devoured by the Soul Reaver nor by Razi himself. Although when you press the devour button after defeating them, it influenced those lights apparently, so there are only more questions than answers. If you know what those things are, let me know in the comments. It's for sure not a bait to make you write a comment and promote this video and show me some love. And maybe leave a like afterwards. Not at all. After that, we see that this was a passage to get under the Pillars of Nosgoth, and the place where we meet an old friend of ours. I want you to check this cutscene completely, because in my opinion it's not less important for the establishment of the characters and laying out of the main conflict than the coin flip scene. So, enjoy.
As I entered the chamber, I sensed that it had been sealed for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. And while this room was clearly built when the pillars were erected, I knew that no human hand could have shaped this place, and that perhaps it had never been seen by human eyes. The surrounding murals depicted a winged race, their features so like my own, but beautiful, where mine were grotesque, and angelic, while mine were demonic. I tried to decipher these images. A great war, but with combatants like none I had ever seen. The pillars, raised by this winged race, who thus defeated their adversaries. The winged beings again, writhing in agony, apparently afflicted with the same bloodthirst I had so recently suffered. And throughout the chamber, inscribed everywhere, images of the Reaver itself. Was this what Cain had urged me to discover? I wondered.
Lies, Raziel. Do not be deceived.
Ah, my ancient benefactor. And I dared to hope we had parted ways forever. Your silence was refreshing, but it lasted. No doubt you have a conveniently inexpressible reason for your presence here?
Do not be insolent, Raziel. I am eternally present here and everywhere, now and always. I am the still center of the turning wheel, the hub of this world's destiny.
But perhaps not so omnipotent as you'd have me believe. Your hold on me appears to be tenuous. I no longer seem to need you. Yet I'm guessing you still need me.
This impudence is unworthy of you, Raziel. Do not forget that you have a task to fulfill here. You are indebted to me.
indebted. You would have me show gratitude for a gift I didn't ask to be bestowed. Do you forget that you forced me to inhabit this vile carcass?
I restored you to yourself, Raziel. It was Cain who destroyed you. The very enemy you've just let slip through your grasp. Do not fail me, my servant.
I serve no one. Not you, not Cain, and not your lackey Moebius.
Moebius is my good servant. I have many.
And if I tell Moebius that he's worshipping a giant squid, do you think his faith will falter?
You have grown willful, Raziel. But beware. To embrace a serpent is to invite poison into your heart. Cain is a sinuous beast. He will seduce and deceive you. You pride yourself on your free will, yet you let that degenerate deter your resolve.
I harbor no illusions about his integrity, nor anyone else's. In fact, I am beset by manipulation on all sides. I merely seek the truth.
These are the fathomless truths, Raziel. The agony of birth and death and rebirth. This is the wheel of fate, the purifying cycle which sustains all life. Vampires are an abomination, a plague which leeches this land of its spiritual strength. They obstruct the flow of life and death. Their souls stagnate in their wretched corpses. But the wheel must turn. Death is inexorable and cannot be denied. Your destiny is irresistible, Raziel. You are my soul reaver, the scourge of the vampires, reaper of their apostate souls. Remain steadfast, end the vampire's parasitic curse, and restore Nosgoth. Cain's blood belongs on your hands.
Cain indeed deserves to die for condemning me to this repugnant form, but if and when I kill him, it will be for me alone to decide.
Cain destroyed you without a flicker of remorse. He tore the soul from your noble corpse, and after you had served him faithfully for 1,000 years, he discarded you in the abyss on a jealous whim. Remember your rage, Raziel. Let it guide your hand.
In this scene, we can see how Raziel has become, as our Mr. Tentacle has observantly noticed, very insolent. There is not a scent of that old Razi who would listen silently to the Elder God and blindly follow orders. This Raziel is more prideful and observant. However, there is no direct incentive for our race not to listen to the Elder God, in my opinion, because there is nothing bad that he has done to him, except for the wounded pride of the first lieutenant being called a servant. And I wouldn't think that this was the main reason why Razi showed distrust. I think that the main one is the fact that Moebius has been the servant of Mr. Squeed for all of this time as well. And among vampires, the Time Streamer haven't had, let's say, a reputation of the most reliable men.
The Oracle's Cave, where Cain's first fateful meeting with Moebius occurred. Moebius played the role of a doddering soothsayer, stirring his pot of visions while dispensing enigmatic predictions to gullible visitors. Underneath the facade was Moebius the Time Streamer, sorcerer of the Circle of Nine, a ruthless manipulator with the power to bend time. Since his murder at Cain's hand centuries ago, these caves have stood vacant, though, like Moebius himself, they are rumored to be only a facade for a much larger, more elaborate complex.
So in my opinion, this combination of shady worshippers and the pride of the Elder God made Raziel resent him. Feeling that his grasp over our soul devourer is slipping away, Mr. Tentacle plays on the same vice of Razy that Cain and Moebius played on to manipulate him. Rage. Elder God plays on it to make Razy kill Cain, Moebius played on it to make him kill Cain, and even the Cain himself played on it to, you guessed it, kill Cain. Some people never learn, I guess. There is also a circle of murals that depict the life of the ancient vampires, and the most attentive players could add 2 and 2 and get to the conclusion that the curse which all vampires were blessed with was obtained in a war with some kind of another very powerful race. We won't know what race that was for now, yet we've gotten another piece of the puzzle. It's also worth noticing that the Elder God has his mane sit in the middle of the pillars, suspiciously making him look like a parasite driving the energy from them. His tentacles also don't cover as much of the place as it was in the future, where at the beginning of the first Soul Reaver we would practically move through a giant cave completely covered with them. In the time of Soul Reaver 2, we also ain't constantly bombarded by the telepathical snaps from Mr. Squeed, which Raziel himself rose to appreciate.
The silence was refreshing, but it lasted.
So we can only deduce that in this time, despite the fact that pillars were corrupted for like 10 minutes, the Elder God is in a much weaker state compared to the future. All of this doesn't add up quite right with the balance restoring notion from him, and makes this situation even more convoluted. Moving on. I like the fact that it's possible to take a swim in the soup where the Elder God marinates. You can't interact with him on neither of the planes, but if you would stay there for a while, you could hear some hidden lines from our many-eyed friend.
Tread carefully, Raziel. Your destiny beckons.
We move through an underwater passage, go over some dark blob guys, see more holes that look suspiciously interactable, and go on. There is more signs of this civilization, and without a doubt, we observe the remains of what the ancient vampires have built. By emerging on the surface, we get into the favorite place of Miyazaki and unravel the person behind the crows talking, Vorador. The man-beast vanishes without saying anything, but Raziel sees it as a welcome and continues after him. At the place we can't get any traces of the Green Wolfman, but we find something more interesting. An old temple designed to be opened by, you guessed it, Soul Reaver. But in order to unravel its secrets, you need to go through some charades and kill a few mummies. We also see a few murals that once again illustrate the importance of the Soul Reaver for the ancients. The forges in this game were a great move forward in comparison to the good old cubicle riddles, but not without their flaws. Firstly, the NPCs inside. When you move from one room to another, they respawn and don't allow you to move forward normally. Most of the time it's not that annoying, but when they block your way for the 5th time, because you're too dumb to do it at the first attempt, it is. Secondly, the puzzles themselves. Let's take for example this room. You come inside and it seems to be clear. You need to move this thing into the middle of the eclipse. Done. The hovering menu tells you without a stop that you can use telekinesis to interact with the object. So that's what I did. It's the first instance where you need to use this feature, so if you played for the first time, good luck even finding it at all. But after all of this, nothing happens. I mean, with how dramatic and exalted the dialogues in this game are, we can't really expect it to be condescending to the players. Yet we get cutscenes like this all the time.
Here I discovered an ancient ruin, unmistakably one of Moebius's time-streaming chambers, but long ago sealed and abandoned to the encroaching swamp. I didn't currently possess the means to break this seal, but I thought in time that I might. There appeared to be a passage here, leading northward into the mountains. The opening, however, was obstructed and too high for me to reach. Perhaps later I would find the means to bypass these obstacles, and Moebius's time-streaming device would provide me passage. But first, I had to find a way back into the stronghold, and I suspected I would find the means within the lake's mysterious shrine.
I find them a little bit undermining and immersive break-in, but most likely necessary. Yet here, using this feature of telekinesis for the first time and moving our head upwards for the first time as well, I'd expect maybe some more hints, especially considering how the game leads you by the hand the whole time. A small arrow upwards or you can break walls to get some sunlight message would save an hour of my life. In my opinion, it's kind of inconsistent and weird, but I think I'm just dumb and nitpick here. Anyways, an hour of frustration later, Raze acquires his first power-up, the Dark Reaver, which you can reapply after bathing the Reaver in the basins scattered all over Nosgoth. Another questionable solution, but whatever. As it goes, I try to give you some real-life references for the architecture of the places we visit, yet everything was already done by the guys from LegacyOfKain wiki, thank them for that, so here is a part from it. The general environment also bears architectural elements from real-world ancient temples, with which much of the architecture of the ruins and designs for Soul Reaver 2 are inspired by real-world ancient Cambodian temples and the architecture and scenery of the Khmer Empire and Angkor regions. In particular, structures such as Angkor Wat, hope I pronounced it right, and Ta Prohm. After leaving the forge, we have our first up close with the Green Goblin, and I leave this piece uncut as well.
You're a ragged excuse for a savior.
Vorador.
I see my reputation precedes me.
It does.
All good, I hope? I've been watching you since you emerged from that accursed stronghold. Strange that your arrival coincides with the corruption of the Pillars. But I'm wondering, are you the catalyst of these events? Or the answer to them?
I don't know what you mean.
I will speak plainly then. I distrust your origins, stranger. Seeing you crawl from the putrid depths of Moebius's keep makes me question your purpose here. And what should I make of your appearance? Not human, clearly, and more demon than vampire. And the Pillars. It is no mere coincidence that your arrival in that clearing heralded the Pillars' decay. And so I ask you plainly, are you the instrument of the Pillars' destruction or their salvation?
Neither.
Very well. Let us look at the other side of the coin. I have followed your journey and watched as you blithely unlocked secrets that have been sealed and forbidden for thousands of years. The path you have been treading is open to only one being. You don't know what you are, do you?
I have been many things. If you find me ignorant, enlighten me.
What's the point? This world is beyond redemption. Let the human cattle have it.
I would expect better than meek capitulation from you.
Centuries of persecution have taught me well. 500 years ago, our race was nearly exterminated by the fanatical crusades of the Seraphan. And now the same sick drama unfolds again. In merely a decade, Moebius's cutthroat citizen army has nearly accomplished what the Seraphan could not. Vampires meddling in the affairs of men. Look where it's brought us.
What am I to make of these secrets I've uncovered, then? The depictions of the winged race, the pillars, and the Reaver.
Fairy tales, boy. The delusions of an ancient culture clinging to hope long after the world had discarded them. Their bloodline trickled away, until only one of the ancients remained, sustained solely by obligation and his unfaltering faith in the old prophecies. But you see, even if you are who you appear to be, it no longer matters. You're simply too late. Janos Audron, the Reaver Guardian, the last of the ancients, and my maker, was murdered by the Seraphan nearly 5 centuries ago. He alone would have the answers you seek, but his secrets died with him. I don't know how you've come even this far without his guidance, or without the Reaver, stolen these 500 years ago by the Seraphan. I'm afraid, my friend, that you and all of us are out of luck.
I had no less reason to trust Vorador than anyone else I had met. In fact, the ancient vampire was the most forthright being I had encountered thus far. If Janos Audron was the key to all this, then I would find him.
I think that the dialogues in this game work that well not in the last place because of the insertion of pretty regular lines and other time very exalted word combinations and terms, like this here for example.
Vorador.
I see my reputation precedes me.
It does.
All good, I hope?
It's interesting to see that Vorador is not less surprised by appearance than we by his. What's more interesting, this wasn't the first crusade that the Seraphan began. There was another one from 500 years ago. Janos Audron, the last ancient vampire, appeared to be also the last keeper of the Soul Reaver back then. Yet he was whacked. So we've got now another objective. Move back in time and have a chit-chat with our similar-looking ancestor. I freaking love the insertion of Vorador here. He is as badass as he was in the first game and pretty damn charismatic as well. I just love this character very much. And before we wrap this episode up, we need to get past the tentacles of our squid friend. So here is another cutscene of Raziel going on his nerves. Enjoy.
Ah, my wayward child returns.
Having unearthed more than you'd like, I suspect. What am I to make of these ruins that litter the land, and these images here in this chamber?
Merely the deceits of a failed civilization. You are being misled, Raziel. This ancient race hoped to manipulate the future with these scrawled misdirections. You must tread carefully. There are dark forces at work in this world, bent on subverting your true destiny.
I have no doubt of that. The question is, am I in their presence right now?
Your arrogance will spell your demise, Raziel. Deny my will, and the arc of your destiny will reach a sudden conclusion.
Your threats are unmoving. Even now, I'm beyond your reach.
My reach is longer than you realize. This is a very dangerous game you're playing, Raziel.
You watched till here and still didn't subscribe? Come on, man. After another mocking of the many-eyed sashimi guy, Raziel is steadfast in his decision to get into the Seraphan Keep and travel back in time to see Janos Audron. But in order to do that, he still needs to get inside. And just like with my videos, the devs had to stretch the process somehow, so welcome to the Light Forge. This forge stays in a stark contrast to the previously visited one in almost everything. Firstly, it's ginormous. I mean, the Dark Forge ain't a regular Japanese apartment either, but here the ancient Wham's plate with gigantomania may be a little too much. Giant walls, giant statues, giant gates and giant corridors. If Vorador has inherited even a fraction of what was left from the ancients, no wonder he can afford so many crows to stalk us. Upon entering and waiting through yet another door opening and closing sequence, we unravel yet another fact about the war of ancient vampires and whoever those guys were. Apparently the pillars were made to weaken the foes of the ancients, so it's pretty peculiar how they transformed from a debuff seal of some ancient race into a central stone of the balance in the world of Nosgoth. Does it mean that there was no balance before the pillars were built? We don't have a lot of info on how the Blue Boys were living before all of that warmongering mumbo-jumbo, but I think that the race that would eventually build things like this couldn't have led the life at the bottom of the food chain. Well, maybe war was the fuel of the progress and they were on some monkey development level. We'll never know. Talking onward about the contrasts, this dungeon here was pretty easy in comparison to the previous one. Everything was very obvious. This hint here, for example, has even struck me a little with how straightforward it was. There is still a question of respawning enemies. Imagine I would fight each of those bastards back in the days. Unnecessary long corridors and this shit, for example. But we've already chewed on this a little, haven't we? After the completion of the riddle, I wouldn't talk a lot about it. It was, let's say, engaging enough. A cool vampiric sphinx destroys the things that could potentially be put into Nosgothian UNESCO Heritage Foundation, cooks up a small nuclear blast, and allows us to suck on that primordial energy of light with our big black blade. Speaking about architecture, I think it's kinda obvious which culture was represented by this temple. Limestone, sand, sun worship, giant column statues, sphinx, it's obviously Vegas. Subsequently to yet another door animation, I've noticed for the first time playing this game, by the way, that the Seraphan Keep was most likely built on a place where there was a shrine to the Elder God, near the Sun Forge. much underwater, there is a small pavement that leads to a many-eyed circle carved in the center. I love the small things like this because it adds layers to the world, makes it feel more believable. And right after that we have a giant gate in the water, which is obviously made for cargoes to dock inside, yet there is no access to open water. Nowhere. So, yeah, sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. Upon entering the place and jumping over people's heads, we find a suspiciously bloodless man. Maybe because the fence is too thick to see through, or maybe because Moebius is not the most generous boss, the guards decided to close their eyes on this. The dialogue with another blood-sucking guy was not so long ago, so of course the culprit of this violent act is none other than the Yellow Daddy himself. So get ready for yet another theatrical catharsis.
Show yourself, Cain.
Here, Raziel. Everything is decided here. You cannot comprehend the magnitude, the rapture and the tragedy of this moment. And yet you must, if Nosgoth is to be dragged from the wreckage of its damnation.
I understand only this, Cain. That you and Moebius have impelled me to this moment simply means I can trust neither of you. I don't know who's pulling the strings, but it no longer matters, because I'm cutting them. I set my own course from here.
If it were only that simple.
Your fatalism is tiresome, Cain.
And profoundly ingrained, Raziel. You must understand, our presence here doesn't alter history. You and I meet here because we are compelled to. We have always met here. History is irredeemable. Drop a stone into a rushing river. The current simply courses around it and flows on as if the obstruction were never there. You and I are pebbles, Raziel, and have even less hope of disrupting the time stream. The continuum of history is simply too strong, too resilient. Except, then how do we explain William here? The beloved boy king turned tyrant. In my youth, I witnessed William's rise to power and his transformation into the nemesis who laid waste to Nosgoth.
Keep your distance, Cain.
Years later, I stumble upon a chance to journey back in history, unaware that the entire affair has been carefully orchestrated by Moebius. In my wisdom, I seize this opportunity to murder the young king before he can ravage Nosgoth, and thereby provide the catalyst Moebius needs to ignite a genocidal war against our race.
I warn you, no further.
This one reckless act unravels the skein of history. The nemesis never becomes the nemesis. William dies a martyred saint. I, the vampire assassin, become the author of my own species' extinction, and Moebius profits from it all. I destroyed a tyrant only to create one far worse. But how can it be so? How, if history is immutable? The answer is here in this room, Raziel. Moebius propelled William and me together, but ensured first that we were both armed with the Soul Reaver. The Reaver is the key. Two incarnations of the blade meet in time and space. A paradox is created, a temporal distortion powerful enough to derail history.
Is this your sorcery?
Not mine, Raziel. Yours. You have nothing to fear from me, Raziel. You hold all of the cards.
Then perhaps I should test your sincerity.
If what you say is true, you should be terrified. I could kill you here and now.
And so you do, Raziel.
What's happening?
We're hurtling towards our destinies, Raziel. What you feel is the pull of history rushing to meet us. This is where history and destiny collide. If you truly believe in free will, Raziel, now is the time to prove it. Kill me now, and we both become pawns of history, dragged down the path of an artificial destiny. I was ordained to assume the role of balanced guardian in Nosgoth, while you were destined to be its savior. But the map of my fate was redrawn by Moebius, and so in turn was yours.
This is madness!
Fight it, Raziel. This moment does not have to be an ending. It can become a prelude.
I can't.
You can, Raziel. Look inside and see that it is so. You have the power to reshape our inevitable futures. Poor William.
What is this?
History abhors a paradox, Raziel. Even now, the time stream strains to divert itself, finding its old course blocked by your refusal to destroy me. The future is reshuffling itself to accommodate your monumental decision. This is where we restore ourselves, Raziel, and reclaim our intended destinies. It may yet be possible for me to assume my role as balanced guardian and return the pillars to their rightful inheritors.
To the vampires. And this is the destiny you have urged me to discover. I don't know what game you and Moebius are playing, Cain, but I refuse to be your pawn. Unlike you, I still revere whatever shred of humanity I've managed to preserve. You will not use me as the instrument of your messianic delusions.
Very well, Raziel. I'll not ask you to trust me. Your truths are for you to discover alone.
Humble words for one who presumes to teach me a lesson at every turn.
Then continue your journey and learn your own lessons, Raziel. Remember, Moebius led you here, but you walk away unfettered. A champion of free will and conqueror of false histories. There is much more for you to unearth, if you have the heart for the truth and the will to see it.
Surprisingly, this time our father was more or less decent. He retold the thing that I was telling you in the first video, please don't steal my bread, Cain, I beg you, and explains the main gimmick of this universe. Soul Reaver possesses an ability to alter a timeline, but only in pair with another one from another time, creating a paradox of sort, with the one glued to Razy's soul and another given by the golden boy. Our Wraith awaits his fate of killing Cain, or at least he is told so. It's funny, but in my memory it's the first instance where our deified guy was shown as someone vulnerable, after the first blood omen, of course. And maybe it's too soon to talk about time traveling shit, but hey, it seems like it's the first time when Cain encounters Razy under these circumstances, yet he knows precisely how things should unfold. Has he already died and gotten this memory transferred to him from an alternative universe? Or has he just seen this event in that time-traveling cinema of Moebius and plainly played a giant gamble? Leave a comment if you know this. Or better not, maybe there is one person that never played the game and watches it for the first time, so let's keep the intrigue. Leave a comment anyway. Tell me about your favorite tea, for example. I'm more of a sencha guy. I love the fact that there is still this father-son dynamic going strong. Cain still comes from a point of power, although a little bit softer. Most likely because he has just dodged a giant bullet. And Razy comments on it in a very sweet way, I guess.
Your truths are for you to discover alone. Humble words for one who presumes to teach me a lesson at every turn.
Afterwards, we can check on the broken Tom and this hilarious effect of time bending. To be honest, I got a little bit lost because I forgot about this small entrance in the Cain's Lieutenant's fan club room. I also think it's quite funny with how the gears are closing behind the guards all the time. I mean, I can kinda understand the same things in tombs and catacombs. You need to prove your worth to the ancient guardians and stuff. Here it looks more like, Bartholomew, there is the demon in the room with Henry and Benedict and little Cooper. Close the gates. Bartholomew, he whacked them. Now open the gates. I know it's gamey game conventions, but it's just fun to think of it that way. Smearing our blade in liquid light and opening the secret room of the time streamer, we are met by the man himself. I adore this interaction because now Razy has much more info on his hands. So it's fun to see how our little snake dances on hard iron. Check for yourself.
Ah, yes. I like that look on your face, Moebius. You really don't know what to do now, do you, old man? Here you are, caught without your damned staff. And I suspect things aren't progressing quite as you'd hoped. You're not used to the fly turning to confront you in your web, are you?
Cain's devious influence has poisoned your mind, Raziel. Now you see betrayal everywhere, even in your closest allies.
We were never allies, Moebius. Conspirators, perhaps. Briefly.
Why did you not kill Cain when you had the chance? He was at your mercy.
Precisely. I had a choice, and I chose mercy. And now I know your sordid little secret. The significance of that displacement I felt when the two Reavers came together. Strangely enough, I was enlightened by the devious Cain, not by you. In fact, I've learned much more than you counted on. I understand now how you've tried to manipulate all of history for your own personal gain. But now all your little schemes are whirling in ruin around you, aren't they? All because I chose to exert my will for once, rather than obey the demands of sorcerers and spirits and demons, all singing the same tiresome refrain, "Kill Cain." I'm setting my own path from here, Moebius. I intend to discover the truth behind all of this.
But you condemn us all with this impetuous act.
Hardly impetuous. It took all the will I could muster. Has my refusal to kill Cain reshuffled your carefully stacked deck of cards?
You really think that you're exercising your free will, Raziel? You're simply Cain's servant.
I do not serve Cain. I merely did not kill him.
Raziel, do not forget your purpose here. You are destined to be the savior of Nosgoth.
Oh, I'm sick of hearing that particular phrase. As for saving Nosgoth, so far I see precious little reason to bother. And I'll choose my own purpose from here on out, Time Streamer. Right now, I choose to manipulate you for a change. Go. In there.
What are you doing?
Come now, Moebius. You're a cunning serpent. You'll piece it together, I imagine. This error is of no further use to me. You will operate this device to provide me passage. I want to see the world in a simpler time, before the Seraphan began their crusade.
And what about Cain? You're leaving your core behind.
You kill him if it's so damned important.
You need only touch the 2 poles of the switch, and the device will transport you. But I urge you to reconsider.
You've lost your powers of persuasion, old man. Rot here and forget me.
In the aftermath of our little soft-soaping of Moebius, the time streamer has cooperatively thrown us into the age where Seraphan Stronghold has turned into shambles. Raziel appears a century after the pillars have collapsed. Cain's decision not to sacrifice himself has led to the destruction of the balance, thus inviting demons to come into this unstable world. If we would talk about it from the gameplay standpoint, the aforementioned demons are incredibly annoying. I know that almost everything in Soul Reaver is used as a narrative instrument, and here the demons had to be shown as the menace they actually were. But damn, being killed by a few attacks, not to mention that the AI here doesn't shy away from ganging you up and spamming the most efficient ones, this ain't something I'd enjoy. Anyway, per usual, I like the continuity being held here, with the designs and elemental powers of many monsters being taken from the first Blood Omen. Their ominous presence was reflected 100% as well. I was shitting myself the time I had to play this section as a kid, especially when they were whispering Razy's name. By this time, almost all of the vampires, excluding Yellow Daddy, were annihilated. This is directly communicated by Moebius with the head of Vorador immortalized in stone. Yet, the question of otherworldly entities in the world of humans still stayed. So the mercenaries of the time streamer have adapted to their more imposing enemies, becoming more massive and imposing themselves. I love their small redesign and how the devs have shown the new adapted nature of the now not vampire but demon hunters, not only in how they look, but also in how they move. They block more often, have much more damage, but are slow and stoky. I might never know the utility of this giant bell going near their necks, but still the new updated look looks dope. A compromise between middle-age appearance of the old vampire hunters and more steampunk vampire hunters from Soul Reaver 1. Reflecting on the treachery of Moebius, what did you expect? And propelling onward to our destiny of meeting Janos Audron, we surprisingly meet the Time Guardian himself, yet in more, let's say, transparent form.
Raziel.
What pathetic charade is this now, Moebius?
No charade, Raziel. Only the entreaties of this martyr spirit.
Your pleas mean nothing to me after all your deceit. You have propelled me into Nosgoth's future, Moebius, and left me stranded here.
I am truly sorry, Raziel, but it was necessary. Consider it the last valiant act of a doomed man. You have strayed from your purpose, and now behold the result. Gaze upon the wasteland you and Cain authored together.
I fail to see how I'm responsible.
You spared Cain, and by doing so, you have released a multitude of horrors upon this world. I can accept that Cain has murdered me, Raziel, As the Time Guardian, I foresaw that incident long before it occurred, and I take some small comfort in the fact that Cain remains the sole survivor of his vile breed. But you have single-handedly made my sacrifice meaningless.
Your argument is disingenuous, Time Streamer. I cannot see how killing or sparing Cain's future self would alter these events. This wasteland was created by Cain's original refusal at the Pillars. And amidst all these twists and turns, that event has never changed. You are cunning, Moebius. I think you've gotten tangled in your own web.
As Cain clings to his precious seat of power, the pillars sink into a mire of decay, dragging all of Nosgoth down with them.
I don't think this has anything to do with the Pillars, or Cain's failure to sacrifice himself. I think you're simply afraid, because you don't know what he's up to. He's a wild card, isn't he? And you don't want his influence in your game. Which is why you wanted me to eliminate him. Well, now that he survived, you have no idea what's coming, do you? Maybe, for the first time in your entire life, you're terrified that he may have truly found a third option out of the dilemma you orchestrated for him.
Cain's lies have addled your mind. Leave this place and trouble my spirit no more.
If you even are a spirit. You've forgotten. I have a way to tell for sure. If you're willing to risk it. I didn't think so. Either way, you lose.
My reaction to this cutscene was, finally, hell yeah! You might have noticed as we move forward through this series of games that Raziel's critical thinking becomes sharper and sharper. Not only he connected the dots and so through the Moebius's facts manipulation, but our blue debater led him to such a degree of desperation where even his denial and expressive backlash was countered, and he was even made to cowardly flee.
I didn't think so.
My boy is growing before my own eyes, hell yeah. And finally, the Stanislavski's gun in the form of the Block Mountain Passage shoots, and Razi, reminiscent of it, goes through yet another section of leaving the Seraphan Keep and moving to the Pillars of Nosgoth. Must say it's not the most engaging part of the game at all. The barriers imposed by the overpowered demons irritate tremendously. I have even come up with a tactic that would fit any musketeer. And a small addition. I adore the doggy redesign of demon hunters. They are just as their masters, much stronger and bigger, yet much slower, which allowed me to spare them even more conveniently. After another one of the badass door openings, we encounter yet another transparent old friend. So let me cut off my blabbering for now.
These were the pillars so familiar to my blighted eyes. But now that I had begun to learn their true significance, I regarded the pillars' destruction with a new, enlightened sense of horror. And I questioned now whether Cain's simple refusal, his mere ambition, could truly have caused such devastation. I felt that some darker influence was at work here. As I approached, I discerned the spirit of Ariel, bound here now for more than a century.
Forever am I bound, hope abandoned, my spirit tethered to this place.
Women.
What destroyed the circle could not touch me, for I was newly dead and beyond harm's reach. I alone was spared the descent into madness, and Cain alone was spared the pain of death. when Napraptor's poison seized Cain even in the safety of the womb. Much more than just his destiny was lost. All of Nosgoth lost balance. Consider us now, both of us less than we once were. I, pure but insubstantial, and Cain, terribly real, but corrupted.
Your imprisonment here has deranged you, Spirit. You fixate on Cain because you believe he is the tether that binds you here. But we both know he is not the author of your agony. The pillars were subverted by dark forces, invited by the Guardians themselves. The more I learn of your circle, the more I see a tangle of nested manipulations.
Cain handed them their victory. They sought to topple the pillars, and he was their willing instrument.
Or was he their unwilling pawn? Would it blunt your wrath to know that Cain's dilemma was calculated to bring the pillars down, regardless of the choice he made, and that the devastation would have been even greater had he chosen the path you would prescribe for him?
You are a subtle, deceitful creature. But your clever arguments do not absolve Cain. He must die for the pillars to be restored. There is no other way.
Then consider this more ominous possibility. What if Cain's death does not restore the pillars? Consider that it may simply be too late, that this world may be beyond redemption, and that you may be bound here eternally.
Why do you hound me, demon? You can see that I am captive here. Show me some mercy.
Like the mercy you showed your fellow Guardians when you set Cain on them? Or the mercy you showed Cain when you kept him ignorant of his destiny while you used him as the scourge of the Circle? Or perhaps like the mercy you showed your beloved Napraptor when you made him Cain's first kill?
You are cruel. Why do you torment me?
I'm merely looking for answers, Ariel. Very well. I'll leave you in peace. But know this about you and this purgatory from which you long to escape. You're merely at the threshold.
Damn, I think our blue boy has entered his no bullshit era as well. With the info that was given to him by Cain and partially encountered all over Nosgoth, Raziel dismantles the mantra that was chanted through the whole beginning of the game. He puts the malevolent things that were done by the characters of the previous games up, making them seem not as pure as some of them would be perceived in the First Blood Omen, for example. Our Soul Eater plays with moral relativism once again, but this time not to blame, but to make people doubt, and to protect himself from manipulations in the first place. And this here.
But know this about you and this purgatory from which you long to escape. You're merely at the threshold.
This was straight up devious. Shadow the Hedgehog vibes intensify. No crows near the place of our many-tentacled friend made me a touch sad, but
we're gonna do.
Entering the place, which usually stayed vacant only for Mr. Sashimi and the brown noise guys, we encounter the alien demon guys as well. I think it was made so as a nod to the involvement of the giant squid in this extraterrestrial invasion. Now our edgy, angry and more straightforward Wraith meets his literally very old friend at the top of his no bullshit position. And I find this back and forth very, very entertaining.
Raziel, the failed assassin. You had Cain at your mercy, but lacked the courage to fulfill the act. And now you see the wasteland wrought by the tyrant's hand, by his selfish decision to preserve his own life, even when it meant sacrificing the whole world. This is the fate of Nosgoth, as long as Cain remains alive.
An ironic condemnation, given this guilty sin. One would think you'd torn down the pillars single-handedly. What are you trying to obliterate as you drag your loathsome body through this chamber? And why, as Nosgoth descends into madness and misery, do you appear to thrive? Things in this world, I am learning, are rarely what they seem. You, apparently, are no exception.
I am the engine of life, the source of Nosgoth's very existence. I am the hub of the wheel, the origin of all life, the devourer of death.
Or maybe you're just hungry. Could it be as simple as that? Wouldn't that be poetic irony? The great adversary of the vampires turns out to be the biggest parasite of them all.
Do not test my patience, Raziel. I made you, and I will unmake you if I become so inclined.
As your agent, I am beyond death.
There are fates worse than death, Raziel.
Oh, I see you now as you truly are. A cancer, a spooling parasite burrowed deep in the heart of this world.
Go now. Play out your pitiful rebellion and take your place among the destroyed, the used, and the damned. But know this, you are mine for eternity. You have always been, and will always be, my soul reaver.
Wasn't that just romantic? Throughout all of his monologue, Raziel touches upon things that I was covering in another video, upper right corner, and perceives the Elder God as he really is. A cancer. Maybe he's not, who knows. Yet anyway, we've just insulted the thing that most likely has given us immortality. Maybe not the smartest decision, but whatever. Raziel has enough Shadow the Hedgehog in him to do even that. We go through the ruins of Vampire civilization yet again. The holes that looked suspiciously interactable in the past find their use in this time, and we finally emerge in the swamps, where Razi met our green friend for the first time. Another Stanislavski's gun shoots in the form of one more of Moebius's time-traveling chambers. And maybe the answer to opening this chamber lays in the mountains of Nosgoth. The swamp itself is inhabited by the demon hunters and apparently redditors. There are not many things to do, considering that the door to the Dark Forge is closed, so we move upwards. There we can observe a canyon with many beautiful sights. I always loved the fact that Soul Reaver encompasses so many places and architectural styles, despite the color palette of the games being quite pale and non-vibrant. And if we are talking about the visual effects, I can't stay silent about the rain effect in this game. I know it's nothing out of ordinary, but when I was little, this effect alone made this bleak future seem even more bleaker and somehow picturesque. Going deeper into the canyons, we enter the first and only village in this game, allegedly being terrorized by Janos Audron, where even Cain in the First Blood Omen reminds us of it.
In my travels I learned much about the legend of Janos Audron. Here in this quaint pastoral village of Ustenheim, that dark enemy was born. Janos preyed upon its peasants until he was finally hunted down and executed.
The village itself looks pretty sad. but no wonders considering the circumstances. And to be honest, there is not much to do here. Yet the layout is looking very detailed, so it's a very cool decoration. Architecturally speaking, it looks just like any other post-Middle Age village should look like in any fantasy setting. Realistic, but with some small twists and turns in the form of at times unnecessary arcs and overlapping buildings. I mean, I can kinda understand why would you do it at a place like Venice, where water takes up most of the place. Here you could carve deeper into the canyon and make more reliable structures instead of throwing them on one another, but I'm no professional, so I'll just put my nerdy emoji away and carry on. Pressing forward, we finally get to the place where Janos Audron has celebrated his many Christmases, and look who we have here.
Oh no. Every time you turn up, something monumental and terrible happens. I don't think I have the stomach for it.
No drama this time, Raziel.
You are persistent, crossing time like this to follow me. Still waiting for that coin of yours to land on its edge.
I'm biding my time. I see that Moebius has played a little trick on you.
Yes, he clearly doesn't want me to meet this Janos Audron.
Perhaps. Or maybe he merely hoped that it would harden your heart against me, to see this wasteland which I single-handedly wore through.
My heart doesn't need hardening, Cain. If I even suspected that destroying you would make any difference, I would do it this instant.
I knew you'd see through them, Raziel. Janos is indeed the key to your destiny, but you'll need to find your own way back into Nosgoth's path. Make no mistake though, Raziel. You and I are now in great danger. We are irritants here. Malevolent forces are being marshaled to eliminate us.
You talk as though we're allies.
Regardless of your sentiments, Raziel, in their eyes, we are.
Well, they're certainly trying to eliminate you, Cain. There can be no doubt of that. I am assaulted relentlessly with demands for your demise. Whatever it is that you're plotting, they're scared to death of you. As for me, I suspect they made a grave error when they allowed my unique resurrection. I don't think they know how to destroy me.
You mustn't underestimate them, Raziel.
And who exactly is this diabolical they to which we keep referring? If there's some grand conspiracy going on, the right hand doesn't appear to know what the left is doing. Even Moebius seems to be caught out at every turn.
Moebius is a puppet, Raziel. Haven't you realized that yet? That's the sweetest irony in all of this. Nosgoth, great manipulator, is their plaything. But the ones pulling the strings haven't shown their faces yet.
They don't like us unwriting their carefully choreographed history, though, do they?
You must understand, Raziel, we haven't unwritten history, we've merely rewritten. The future flows around our petty actions, finding the path of least resistance, while admitting only the slightest alterations. This is the reshuffling you felt when you refused to kill me. And remember, Raziel, we are irritants in this regard as well. History will not allow the introduction of a paradox.
And if events cannot be reshuffled to accommodate the change?
It is the irritant who's expelled. Bear in mind that this may be exactly the outcome our enemies are trying to provoke. We must tread very carefully.
A story as old as life. Two adversaries join up in a struggle to overcome their enemy. You know, I love that they meet up just like some old homies, setting aside their differences, and as Cain observantly noted,
No drama this time, Raziel.
the chemistry between them is just adorable in my opinion. Cain has even sincerely laughed during their exchange. Once during the races, seeing him, and second time he laughs off Razy's threats to kill him. Cain sees no enemy now, Reaver of Soul. He put his bet on Razy and was right. No wonder, he knew him for over a millennium. Then they go over their hidden enemies that plot and scheme at every turn. Their whole conversation about these ominous them has a vibe of me and my friends sitting in the kitchen and talking about some great conspiracies. I fucking love this interaction and hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. I know that especially after the last video, I can't really share my opinions on the sound balance, but here Rain, as cool as it is, makes some words getting lost. Just thought I needed to mark that. Moving onward, we get to yet another forge and jump right inside. I don't know about you, but seeing the symbol, as well as this communist dream interior of the place, I thought wholeheartedly that this was a fire forge. Well, who am I to tell? I think we wouldn't attribute colors to genders or elements at this point, so let's just carry on. I like that the main motive of Raziel to get there is, well, I don't really have other things to do anyway. Which is very realistic, but seems a bit out of place in such a narrative-driven story. What can I say about this forge? It's the best one in the game actually. The riddles were not annoying and even kinda entertaining. I wouldn't go in depth with them, but I like the fact that their solving provides us with yet more lore regarding vampires, with them sacrificial altars and bloodstones staring out of the walls. I also stumbled upon a weapon which has the coolest animation in the game as well, so hell yeah, this forge was cool as hell. Per usual, I try to say a few things on the topic of culture and architecture, and apparently here it's the Mesoamerican cultures that are represented. I wouldn't play into uniqueness here and take the passage written by the pros from LegacyOfKain wiki. God bless their souls. The Airforge consequently has many design elements and features associated with Mesoamerican culture and architecture. These include prominent step and pyramid designs, arched doorways, pictography, hieroglyph writings, arcane symbols, carved tenon stone heads and skulls, oversized stele carvings, and apparent sacrificial practices. Many of the design elements were inspired by and in some cases directly copied from real-world Mesoamerican designs. At the end of this Mesoamerican flavored adventure, we get yet another upgrade which allows us to use air spitting holes for gliding. You know, the request cut and patches stage of Moebius, and these gliding things have reminded me of a certain mission from Assassin's Creed 2. But maybe it's just me. Another property of the blade, an ability to completely obliterate slightly cracked walls. Per usual comes a question if an entity that could do things like this wouldn't be able to just drag this thing through, but repeat after me. Gamey game conventions. Don't have anything against it, just thought that this stuff should be made vocal as well. With this surprisingly convenient find, we can get into another time-traveling chamber of Moebius, and you guessed it, time travel. In the last episode, Pablo Chiropractor played a gamble, or threw a coin if you will, and activated one of the Moebius's time-traveling devices to, you guessed it, time travel. I always thought it was kinda strange that Razy talks about time limitations here.
I had no choice but to act purely on blind faith. There was no way to tell what error this device was tuned to, and I had neither the knowledge nor the means to set the machine myself. I hesitated only briefly.
I suppose he could even take 100 years to figure out how this thing works and just go to the exact time he needs. Not to mention that scholarship loans was still not invented in the realm of Nosgoth, so there are always options. Yet I presume starting in a semi-apocalyptic world would make for not the most engaging gameplay. So the tides of the storytelling conveniently take us to the exact point we had to be in.
Beyond all hope and against all probability, it seemed that the device had unerringly delivered me to the era I sought. For these were Saraphan banners, and these vampires apparently the victims of their crusade. The coincidence seemed too convenient to naively ascribe to fate. But whether my opportune arrival had been orchestrated by Moebius or some other influence, I didn't know. If Janos Audron still lived, I would find him. I was wary of further deception and resolved to tread carefully.
Raziel appears 500 years prior to the events of the First Blood Omen. Suffering from the blood curse, the Ancient Ones had to somehow procreate, so many people were turned into vampires, sometimes even against their own will. And by many I mean a lot, which is visible by the amount of ex-humans literally chilling on the stakes. Such a drastic change in Vamp's population wasn't to the liking of humans, especially considering the fact that many children were straight up kidnapped to become bloodsuckers, so they formed an order which we now know under the name Seraphan, thus beginning their crusade against the aforementioned vampires.
By all that is holy!
Here at last, in the flesh, I beheld my former brothers in arms, the warrior priests of the Saraphan Order, their lives devoted solely to the annihilation of the vampire plague. And while I confess, I felt a twinge of longing, a pang of grief for what I had believed was my lost virtue, I regarded them now with none of the reverence I formerly felt. For I had seen the human face of the vampires, and now I beheld the monstrousness of these men.
Seraphan's cruelty doesn't omit Raziel's gaze, and even if we would consider kidnapping and the fact that vampires had to somehow sustain themselves, such barbarity would put people not very far from their blood-sucking adversaries. And if we would come back to my question on how well the vampires were implemented into society from the first video and this passage of Razy,
Things in this world, I am learning, are rarely what they seem.
I always thought it was strange that Raziel refers to the human side of the vampires. I mean, as a vampire, Raziel was pretty devious. We could observe this in the Soul Reaver comic book, which shows us a bit of life of the first lieutenant before his execution. I don't think that what he saw after his awakening as a wraith and what he did as the first lieutenant could be marked as humane, especially considering his very fast change of heart after uncovering his Saraphan past. Maybe he saw something humane in Vorador because he was kinda sweet to Raziel during their meeting. But the Green Goblin was actually a fucking maniac if we would consider the First Blood Omen. Of course, he became like this because of the human persecution, But what's human about that? Even animals can resort to revenge. I mean, it's more like Raziel saw the demon side of the Seraphan in all of that Dracula-like cruelty, but from the side of the vampires there wasn't anything good at all. Well, from what was given to us as players at least. Yet they were cool architects, I guess. There's not so many things to tell about the Seraphan soldiers. They look very cool and kinda angelic, but from the gameplay standpoint, it's the same dummy-dumb NPCs. I like that they made Kanyas into bold mage ladies though. Gives out that more ancient and magical flair to this time. After giving hell to our ex-comrades in faith, we go through the already explored canyon and get inside of Wustenheim. I prefer the non-ruined look of it much more. Once again, hats off to the sound designers of Soul Reaver. You would never believe how much worse a game feels when the sound design is made dull or too repetitive. Here we have different sounds for icy, slightly and moderately snowy surfaces and the regular ones as well. I also forgot to mention that they picked a very cool sound when Raziel walks on the shadows in the forges. And don't know about you, but the sound of Raziel's claws piercing through something, as well as this menu click sound, I'm sure Apple stole it, are so pleasant to my ears. I know it's more of a nostalgia thing, but in my opinion this game has a crazy good sound design. Let me know if you want me to make an ASMR of the sounds from the Soul Reaver.
After my long journey, I finally stood on the threshold of enlightenment. For here was Janos Audron's mountain retreat, intact and unblemished. The upheaval that would one day topple this ancient edifice had not yet occurred. And while I had no certainty that Janos still lived, this scene boded well, for I presumed that the collapse of the retreat must have followed the ancient vampire's demise. There was only one obstacle: how to reach the balcony suspended at that maddening height, so far beyond my reach. For this was the architecture of winged creatures. The tattered ruins of my wings were of no use. I would need to devise some other means into that mountain.
You know, this game makes me question my brain capabilities at times, because it took me a little while to get through this otherworldly sphincter. From the get-go we see that this place has a peculiar architecture style, with the bright violet color, underwater vampiric arches, and these Daedric-like framing everywhere, but that was just the beginning.
The mountain's interior was hollow, I discovered, and graced with soaring architecture unique to its creators. As with the outer facade, these balconies and galleries could only be reached by those gifted with flight. With only my ruined wings to carry me, this towering labyrinth seemed impassable, while the object of my quest lay just beyond my grasp. For here, suspended at the apex of the chamber, was the threshold that surely led to the great vampire himself. I didn't know whether Janos Audron was the monster depicted in the Stronghold, or one of the noble creatures memorialized among the ruins of the ancient vampires. But I didn't care. Demon or angel, he alone held the key to my destiny.
I really love the layout of the place. It looks very distinctive, cold and menacing, just like the masters of the place themselves. I also love the fact that along the way to Janos' retreat we can spot a few similar structures that would be hard to get to without a pair of wings. Another beautiful world-building thing that makes the world of Nosgoth more believable. I also like the spin on the blood magic during solving the puzzles. It's indeed very cool to see creative ways of implementing magic for more or less practical ways. I could easily imagine the turned wingless vampires doing all of this blood-carrying routine to meet with Janos because, well, it must be getting boring when you live for so long. It's just like in prisons. You imagine a lot of dumb activities when you have a lot of time on your hands. The riddle itself was not that hard actually. It's like with IQ tests. When you see those for the first time, you're like, fuck, what do they want from me? But after solving a few of them, it all starts to make sense. Same thing with the riddles in this game. The first forge could have made you doubt your intellectual abilities, but if you manage to get here somehow, it becomes not that bad with time. Not a big fan of backtracking though. Yet they took care of the players by providing these bloody holes. No pun intended. I also like the fact that there is animation for pouring in and out of these blood jars. I think the riddle had to be much more convoluted, with more actions regarding blood in these vessels, and thank God the devs stopped where they did. Finally, we get to talk with our ancient blue target, so I'll let our friends do exactly that.
Janos, Audron?
It is heartening after all these years to hear my name spoken without contempt. Raziel? My child, what have they done to you?
I have been dragged through hell and back. All it seems to reach this moment. But I don't yet know why.
For thousands of years I have waited, alone here, losing faith. At the time of the binding, 9 guardians were called to serve the pillars, and I was summoned as the 10th guardian, the keeper of the Reaver, the weapon of our salvation. Over time, our race died out, until I alone remained, sustained only by my obligation to you and by my guardianship of the blade.
And the other 9? Why did their guardianship not sustain them?
I don't know. As our race dwindled, the humans prospered. I have watched over the centuries as our history faded into myth and finally receded altogether. The humans have forgotten us entirely and claimed the pillars for themselves, wholly ignorant of their true purpose. To them, I am merely a devil, the origin of their vampire plague.
Why would the pillars summon human guardians then, if they are meant to be served by vampires?
The pillars choose their guardians from birth, Raziel, and vampires are no longer born. This is the crux of our dilemma, and this is the terrible irony. With their vampire purge, the members of the Circle have assaulted the very architects of the pillars they are sworn to protect. They have embarked on a treacherous path. With every vampire they kill, the humans are slitting their own throats. They know I'm up here, beyond their reach, and it terrifies them. You can see how they flaunt their kills to torment me. Or perhaps simply to lure me out. They have this foolish notion that destroying me will somehow topple our entire bloodline. Thankfully, we're not that fragile.
I have seen them mustering their forces in the village below.
Yes. I don't know what they're plotting, but I fear our time may be bitterly short.
Mankind seems to have brought you only torment and grief. You must hate them.
They fear what they don't understand, and they despise what they fear. But no, I do not hate them.
Vorador does.
He has suffered much. He cannot forgive them.
Should they be forgiven?
They don't understand what they're doing. They are simply unenlightened and vulnerable to manipulation.
So, It's all true then, what Cain and Vorador have told me. I really am some kind of unholy vampire messiah.
Unholy? No. Messiah, perhaps.
I don't like that word. It smells of martyrdom.
Raziel, your role in this world's destiny is more crucial and more benevolent than you've allowed yourself to believe. Your journey will not be easy. Dark powers are allied against you. But I think you already know this. You appear to have been cruelly tested. The binding must be secured, Raziel. The pillars are the lock.
And the Reaver is the key.
Yes.
The Reaver is here. Why do I feel nothing?
The most formidable weapon ever forged by our swordsmiths. They infused the blade with vampiric energy, empowering the Reaver to drain our enemies of their precious lifeblood.
As Janos presented the blade, an inexplicable sense of dread crept over me, more palpable than anything I'd felt before. I was at once horribly repelled by the sword, and yet irresistibly compelled to touch it, to take it up. Please, take it away from me.
I fear you have been followed. You must save yourself, Raziel.
Janos! No! My surroundings whirled sickeningly, and I found myself transported safely away from the ambush to an adjacent chamber. Janos had delivered me from the Seraphan, selflessly forfeiting his own safety to preserve my life. And now I feared that my newfound mentor would be slaughtered by the very crusaders I had so recently revered. The irony pierced me, and with dawning horror, I realized that I had been duped by Moebius from the beginning. For the Seraphan had simply followed the path I gullibly blazed through this sanctuary, and had arrived bearing Moebius' staff. Thus armed, they had Janos at their mercy. Through the door, I could hear them battling, less than a dozen paces away. But it may as well have been 1,000 miles, for this barrier was sealed by elemental forces I did not possess. It seemed Janos had conveyed me into the heart of the fire shrine. I thought perhaps if I could galvanize the forge and imbue the Reaver in time, I might have a slim chance of saving Janos from his grisly fate.
I mean, although it's my bread and butter, I don't want to retell all of what you've just heard. Instead, I want to talk a little about Janos himself. Despite the fact that he sounds like a guy who would surely invite us for a round of bowling, he appears to not to be the scourge he was described as by Seraphan Order. Yet I'm still peculiar if even a fracture of that description was true. As we can see, he did admit that new vampires were never born, thus partially admitting the fact of children kidnapping. I can presume that the 10th Guardian himself haven't had to feed on the humans because of the forces of the balance that would sustain him or something like this, by a cutscene from the beta version of Soul Reaver 2.
Damn those Seraphan! We must find a way to stop these loathsome humans. What are you?
We can presume that there was some vampires still in contact with him, considering that the vampires themselves were in the proximity of his merry house. Considering also that they had to somehow sustain themselves, and the fact that he is a big fan of vampires, have been the coolest one himself, I don't think that he would advocate against his relatives feeding on others. Another thing,
it is heartening after all these years to hear my name spoken without contempt.
It means that most of the time he heard it with a degree of contempt, to say the least. I presume he would defend himself and would do it pretty often, considering the corpses of vampires outside as a bait and what Cain said in the first Blood Omen. I don't think that all of those rumors could appear from the thin air, though he did say that he's been waiting for thousands of years there, so maybe he didn't. To be honest, I don't know. It seems he wasn't a demon that was described by the Seraphan, yet Vorador, for example, indeed was. As Raziel said,
"Things in this world, I am learning, are rarely what they seem."
I think it's up to you to decide. Me personally would forgive him everything for such a comfy fireplace with the bookshelves. Anyway, we were thrown into the Fire Forge, and in the Fire Forge we are. The forge itself is the last and the smallest one of them all. And just like Janos' fireplace, I find it very comfy with the more manic style arches, Gothic stained glass windows and gargoyles spitting blood. The riddle to it was a throwback to the Fire Forge we had in the first game, where a torch had to be lit and taken from point A to point B, yet I kinda missed the demonic demon fire god. Crazy's statue with the flaming soul reaver looked cool as well though, so whatever. The sword imbued with fire energy went through the threshold of the gate, opening our gaze to the unfolding drama. So I'll just shut the fuck up for now.
Hold him!
Look at his black heart! How it still beats!
The fiend intends to bury us alive! Raziel, we must get out of here!
Remember the sword! Forgive me. I'm sorry. I failed you.
No, Razia. Perhaps this was my true purpose. Simply to save your life this once.
While I have taken yours.
Embrace your destiny, Razia. You must reclaim the Reaver. It was forged for you and you alone. Without it, there is no hope.
As I backed away from Janos' body, I was overwhelmed by a sense of self-loathing so deep I could barely contain it. In that instant, I rejected all that I ever was, and embraced the role Janos had safeguarded for me so patiently throughout the centuries. I knew then what I had to do, the task for which I was uniquely prepared. I would pursue the Seraphan dogs to their loathsome fortress and avenge Janos Audron's murder. Moebius would pay dearly for his treachery, and my Saraphan brethren would reap the horrors they had sown. I would retake the stolen Reaver, which was rightfully mine. And finally,
when all these debts have been paid, I would reclaim Janos Audron's heart from their filthy, unworthy hands. If the heart was truly imbued with the power to restore vampiric unlife, its highest purpose was clear to me. I would restore the heart to Janos, and thus undo the vile crime committed by my abominable former self.
Yep, Raziel meets Raziel. The white Caucasian Raziel skedaddles, and the blue Raziel finally duplicates the scene that we saw in the Chronoplast in the first game. I have nothing to add actually, besides the fact that I love Emily Henning and her machinations to make this throwback possible. Just genius. After the vanquishing of Janos Audron by his former self, Raziel, full of rage, strolls down the mountains in the quest of punishing the Seraphan for their misdeeds.
We've been expecting you, little Raziel.
So, these demonic pests were not merely the product of Nosgoth's corrupted future.
For here they were, hurtling back over 5 centuries to pursue me. These creatures, I suspected,
were minions of the unseen forces that had hoped to control me. This was the tangible expression of their displeasure. These demons were unleashed as the penalty for my disobedience.
Along the way we meet a handful of demons which try to undermine our efforts, yet with no real success. It is of course a little bit annoying that they put up the portals which block our way, but hey, if you don't lock on them, those encounters should be a piece of cake. Not to mention that most of the time brave Seraphan soldiers tend to jump right into the bloodbath, so we can capitalize on their selfless sacrifice by munching on their yummy souls.
Never should have come here!
Yet one needs to stay on distance, because obviously a husk of human body looks more dangerous than 3 Diablos strolling about, so every living hostile soul would choose Raziel as their main target. Gradually more and more powerful demons appear to measure our strength, yet those are the same good old dumb demons, maybe a bit bulkier, so they wouldn't pose any challenge. We go down, utilize the musketeer tactic I mentioned in one of the previous videos, right up a link. See a Lord of the Ring reference from one of the monsters.
You shall not pass.
And jump right into the cave of the Elder God. I was prepared for yet another backtracking-filled mind and body gymnastics with the utilization of different blades and all of that mambo-jumbo that we saw in the Janos' retreat, yet the almighty devs spared my cognitive center and allowed me to navigate through the dungeon with almost no charades. Thank you. Masterfully avoiding any kind of confrontation, we finally get to Mr. Tentacle and drop a good old fuck you bomb on the slimy old ass.
You have failed me, Raziel.
I wonder, Old One, did you truly resurrect me, or were you simply there when I awakened from my torment in the abyss? I suspect you found me merely convenient, dropped in your lair by Cain, indestructible for some reason, a durable and gullible tool for you to manipulate. This one thing I readily admit. I have been used by others time and again, but always I seem to stray from their path. What is it about me, demon, that makes me such an unreliable instrument? Why do I survive one trial after another, on and on, in an endless succession of humiliating deaths and resurrections? It seems there is much more to my destiny and my history than I know. Perhaps more than you know as well.
The Elder God is not that happy about our arrival, yet he doesn't do anything if we take a bath in the bouillon where he marinates, besides swearing, of course.
Traitor!
Outside of the Elder's cave, we see no crows. Apparently Vorador has some better things to do. Yet we see the brown noise guys outside of any walls for the first time, which is peculiar. I always thought they wore one more introverted side. Near the pillars of Nosgoth, 3 giant diabloids met us with the clear intent of our decapitation. And who thought it was a great idea to put 3 of them in one place? I haven't said that before, but these bastards are tough. They have spammable attacks which deal preposterous amounts of damage. Add to that the not less spammable range attacks. If Reaver wasn't an OP weapon it is, one could have a really fucking bad and boring time here. Thanks God the blade is OP though. After marveling at the beauty of the pillars, we avoid some more unnecessary violence and get to the only place in the game, besides the Fireforge door, where the Fire Reaver has a utility. I like the fact that the lightning and gamma of the Seraphan Keep in this time looks identical to how it was shown in the first Blood Omen. For many Blood Omen fans, it would be a dream to walk inside of that iconic cutscene, I presume. For yours truly as well. Upon unaliving a few more caged soldiers, we happen to get into the room with the stolen Reaver. And hope you're ready for another evil monologue.
Suddenly and inexplicably, I discovered the Reaver suspiciously laid across my path. Again, I sensed nothing of that temporal distortion, the peculiar sense of displacement I had felt when I encountered the Reaver in William's chapel. Cornered here with the blade, I suffered the same nameless dread that I had experienced when Janos first presented the Reaver to me. I felt at once repelled by the blade, and yet overwhelmingly compelled to seize it.
So, Raziel, here we are finally. You have no choice but to confront me now, and I am not so foolish as I've let you believe. We have business to conclude.
You knew I would lead the Seraphan to Janos, you vile bastard. You've been orchestrating my every move. My destiny is an amusement to you.
It was fun while it lasted. I think not, Raziel. Malik, do not let this creature leave. He poses a danger to the circle. Poor, deluded Raziel, did you somehow imagine you had the guile to change history on me? I'm the time streamer. I knew your every intention before you did, you imbecile.
Call your dogs! They can feast on your corpses!
Lord Moebius, there is trouble within. The circle is under attack.
Fast, Malik. This one is the real danger to us.
What are you trying to concoct here, Moebius?
You toxic creature. Did you imagine I'd simply allow you to run loose, corrupting everything you encounter?
I admit that I've underestimated you to this point, Moebius. But it's a mistake I won't repeat.
Wrong again, Raziel. Now, Malik, bolt the door.
Using his staff to disable my Wraithblade, Moebius effectively disarmed me, leaving me with only one choice of weapon. And yet I confess, it was not the lack of options, but blind rage that made me take up the Reaver. In my fury, it felt as though my hand had acted of its own will. And now, that same hand clutched the hilt with unyielding strength, and I felt a constrained tingling, a remote but palpable sense of longing,
as the disabled Wraithblade tried vainly to embrace its physical twin.
Yep, you guessed that right. We got inside at the exact same time when Vorador enacted his attack on the circle. And now we know that he did it not for fun, although it looks like he's having a great time, but rather as vendetta for massacring his master. Kinda sad, really. What's not sad is the unification of Raziel and the Reaver. In fact, they like each other so much that if you try to drop the blade, following happens.
Now that I had taken it up, the Reaver and I were inescapably joined. The harder I tried to release the blade, the more tightly my hand gripped the hilt, as if possessed of its own will.
Neat.
Come to take your revenge, demon. Back to hell with you!
I recognize these two as my former brethren, in life as Seraphan, and in unlife as Cain's vampire sons. Melchiah and Zephon, the weakest of Cain's brood. These bastards had no idea what future lay in store for them, how they would become the very thing they so despised. The Reaver hummed with ravenous anticipation. Janos had called it a vampiric blade, endowed with the power to drain its victims of their lifeblood. I was eager to see what the Reaver would do to these two.
It's kinda even scary to see Raziel in such a state of literal bloodthirst. I can feel a flicker of nostalgia for his vampire days in his voice. It's even scarier because of the fact that he is not hesitant to put his sword to use, especially considering that our race was kinda warm toward Melchiah in the decaying future of Nosgoth. Upper right link where I talk about Melchiah's encounter. The boss fight, if you can call it that, is pretty dull. The future lieutenants of Cain have a few new animations and are much faster, which precisely destroys the already questionable fighting system. You see, the game contradicts itself in the terms of combat. If you lock onto the target, Raziel can use either heavy or light attacks. It works already only halfway because of the questionable hitboxes, yet here it's getting even more exaggerated by the even more fast and spammable movement of Melchiah and Zephon. The only possible way of overcoming this is to run with no autolock and spam the running thrust attack, which is the fastest one, thus turning this epic battle into fucking running circus. The other thing is that the blade made Razi invincible, which destroys any type of challenge this encounter would have possessed, but you had to hear it just about right now.
As Melchiah and Zephon fell before my blade, I felt the Reaver's bloodthirst as keenly as I ever had when I was still a vampire. I could sense the boundary between us dissolving. The Reaver was consumed with my rage, and I was intoxicated by its bloodlust. The blade had a vitalizing effect on me. My physical energy no longer decayed over time, and the wounds inflicted by my foes healed almost instantly. The Reaver had made me invincible.
Yeah, I suppose the devs had to make Razi invincible because otherwise these guys would just demolish any player. So either this or the remaking of the whole fighting system. And this happens if you try to go into the spectral realm.
The Reaver exerted some mysterious power over me. It sustained my energy, enabling me to prolong my physical manifestation indefinitely. In fact, bonded to the blade as I was, I could no longer shift into the spirit realm at will. Nor was I able to summon the Reaver's twin, for my Wraithblade had been disabled in the confrontation with Moebius.
I love that the devs thought about it as well and not just made the button not interactable.
Have you come to reclaim the monster's black heart?
You'll have to get through us first.
My former brethren Duma and Rahab confronted me next. This all seemed so elegantly choreographed. Exhilarated by the Reaver, I was drunk with revelations. I could finally appreciate the delicious irony of Cain's blasphemous private joke, and I reveled as I colluded with him across the centuries. For it was I who put these bastards in their tomb, thus providing the corpses for Cain to raise as his vampire sons a millennium from now.
I'm curious if Cain would appreciate Raziel's approval of his very niche meme. The fight with other brothers is as dull as it was with the first ones, yet I like the fact that, unlike any other NPCs, these ones are not in a hurry. Looks very dope. The oldest after Raziel's sibling Tyrell was left for desert. I think the authors knew the calamity his absence in the first game made, so this encounter had to be made personal. And it was.
Get back to the pit you crawled from, demon.
And here at last was my brother Tyrell, who along with Duma would bear me into the abyss without questioning Cain's command. So dutiful and righteous, even as a vampire. I guess some habits die hard. The vampire Tyrell had eluded my vengeance. The Saraphan Tyrell would not.
After yet another fratricide, we go to meet ourselves, and damn, that's an interesting scene to see.
So, vampire, here we are. You've destroyed my brethren, and now you've come for me. You'll find I'm not such easy prey. I don't want to kill you, but I will if I must. Return the heart to me, and we can end this now. So, you've come to avenge that filthy parasite and reclaim his foul heart. You're a righteous fiend, aren't you? Apparently I am. No, vampire. This is where it ends, but you won't be leaving this room. Now, let's finish this. I'll make it mercifully quick. As you did for Janos? No, that beast had eluded us for far too long. It would have been a shame to end him too quickly. It's ironic, really. The great Janos Audron turned out to be no challenge at all. Thanks to you. Did you hear his cowardly screams when I tore that black heart out of his carcass?
I freaking love that even with how high the stakes are and how serious the situation is, the irony of what's going on doesn't elude Razy. The apparently I am is just hilarious. I also like that Razy bolts into the fight really fast, with no "you'll pay for this" or such bullshit. The white Caucasian Raziel went too far, and for that he will pay with his blood. The final battle of the game is plagued by the same problems that I've already described, and although even more animations were added, the Caucasian Razy is too fast to try to fight him in the intended lock-in mode. So the fight transformed into a travesty really fast. And now here is the final scene, so I'll let you enjoy it quietly.
I renounce you. And
And so it ends. My history comes full circle.
Sensing its twin, the Wraithblade uncoiled itself from me, and instead wound lovingly around its former self. I felt its grip loosen, and as the blade left me, its absence chilled me more than its presence ever had. A foreboding sense of emptiness and loss stole over me, and a terrible revelation gathered like a storm at the edge of my awareness. With all other foes exhausted, the conjoined blades turned themselves on me, and I realized, finally, why I had sensed nothing when Janos offered me the blade. The Reaver was never forged to be a soul-stealing weapon. The ravenous, soul-devouring entity trapped in the blade was, and always had been, me. This is why the blade was destroyed when Cain tried to strike me down. The Reaver could not devour its own soul. The paradox shattered the blade. So, this was my terrible destiny. To play out this purgatorial cycle for all eternity. I could not bear it. Despair overwhelmed me. You.
Are you enjoying this, Cain?
Don't fight it, Raziel. Give into it.
Was this your destiny for me all along?
Trust me.
I felt myself weakening, unable to hold on any longer. The Reaver was too strong. The compulsion to simply let go, too great. And then, a growing sense of vertigo and the familiar displacement. The paradoxical moment when my twin soul hovered both outside and inside the Reaver blade. This was the instant, the glimmer of temporal distortion Cain had been counting on all along. This was the edge of the coin, the minute flicker of probability upon which Cain had gambled everything.
Now you are free to reclaim your true destiny, Raziel.
Behind Cain's eyes, I could see new memories blooming and dying as history labored to reshuffle itself around this monumental obstruction. And I could see by the dawning horror on his face that perhaps we had strained history too far this time. That by trying to alter my fate, he may have introduced a fatal paradox.
My God. The Hilden. We walked right into their trap. Raziel, Janos must stay dead.
But Cain's warning was lost as I slipped into the spirit realm, too weak to maintain my physical form. And there, waiting for me as always, was the Reaver, the Wraithblade, my own soul, twinned and bound eternally to me. And I realized that I could never escape my terrible destiny. I had merely postponed it. History abhors a paradox.
Bravo! What a great story. So what has just happened? For that, in a very Legacy of Kain-like fashion, we need to go back in time. What the fuck is a Soul Reaver, you might ask? Well, it's the name of the game and actually the main protagonist of it. And it's indeed true. The Soul Reaver was being the protagonist of the games this whole time. To understand that, however, We also need to understand the time theory on which Legacy of Kain is built. The Novikov self-consistency principle means that if history is changed, it's indeed changed. So in the realm of Nosgoth, the Wraith Raziel has always existed and always killed his former self. That's important to keep in mind. In the first existing timeline, Raziel waxed the old Cain near the time of William. That's also important to keep in mind. So firstly, the blade was forged by Vorador, enchanted by Janos, then stolen by the young Raziel, then Wraith Razi kills the young Razi, and then the blade devours the soul of Raziel. Cain is dead and can't help, thus the sword transforms from the Blood Reaver into the Soul Reaver. Then this Reaver is given to William, another one from another time is taken by the fledgling Cain, and we have this celebration going for eternity. In the timeline of Soul Reaver 2 though, Raziel never killed Cain, thus allowing himself to be saved and opening the timeline for the next 2 Legacy of Kain games. Yet it's neither the place nor time to talk about them. If we would talk about the game itself, it is certainly a game. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it and it has many bright sides, but it became irreversibly old. The good sides of the game are, firstly, the reduction of unnecessary parts from Soul Reaver 1, unnecessary magic was cut out, although in this game it could have found much more use. The cubicle fucking riddles are gone. The forges became a much better alternative. And this dumb fucking talent we got from Duma is also no more. The only talent of all brother that haven't made it into the game, by the way. The sound design is still great, the music is great, the fighting system can be a little bit fun at the beginning. And of course, the cutscenes between the gameplay is an embodiment of theatrical catharsis. The problem is that the parts between those cutscenes became very fucking dull with time. And we lost the decadent post-apocalyptic setting of the first game, though I do understand that we can't use it here because of the story. All in all, my verdict is the same as it was with the first Soul Reaver. Buy this game somewhere, give the devs a few bucks and just enjoy the cutscenes on YouTube. I do agree that this game would shine so bright, only if the gameplay in between the scenes would be made more engaging, and not in a AAA generic sense of word modern. These games are in a dire need of a remake, and hope this video could make a tiny contribution into seeing it someday. And that's that, another amalgamation of my old wits. If you watched till here, my sincerest gratitude. And please do subscribe and leave me a comment if you want to see something like this in the future. Stay tuned, because there is much more to come. I love you guys. Have a good one.